Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 47 of the Future of Work show. Now, I know this is an episode that many of you have been waiting for, and I don't really need to introduce our guest here. I have author, influencer, entrepreneur, and actually the list is endless, Ankur Warikoo with me. So, welcome, Ankur, on the show.
Thank you so much, Shalini. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be having a conversation with you, and it's a pleasure to be on the show.
No, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And if I'm really honest, Ankur, part of the reason is for our audience and part of it is personal. I feel I can learn a lot from you. And really, that was part of my, personal reason for having you on the show. So delighted to have you here.
No,
Um,
you're being very kind, but thank you again.
Uncle, firstly, congratulations. Your book, Do Epic Shit, is an absolute bestseller. And I don't know if I told you this. It's a funny story, but I wanted to title our conversation with the name of your book. And for at least a day, I kept trying to set up the podcast, and I just wasn't able to. So I reached out to StreamYard, which is the platform we use, and I asked them, what's going on. And for the longest time, they said, there's a tech hitch, and we're trying to get it sorted. And then another 24, 48 hours passed, and I was sort of panicking. How do I set this up? And then the lady on the other side was kind enough to say, why don't you change the title? Don't use cuss words. LinkedIn doesn't like it. And I changed it and it worked. I mean, who would have thought that that would
Who
be
would
the
have thought?
case?
I remember this. This reminds me, Shalini, of an interview that I was giving to one of India's largest TV media house, and the lady who was at the other end uh, engaging in a conversation was like, "You have to know this, Ankur. For the first time in our existence, we're going to be using the word shit on national television." And I had to get a legal permission from our law department to allow for that. So I think it's ruffled a few feathers already. Clearly, StreamYard has some way to go, but
And this
that's
is
a funny
LinkedIn,
story.
Apparently, LinkedIn had a problem. YouTube was fine with it. No surprises there. But delighted, Ankur. And I think one of the things which I've been following your journey for a little while. We both had some association with Harappa, and a little bit through that, a little bit otherwise. My daughter's a fan. Let me say, uh, she goes to your alma mater, ISP. So that's another added connection right there. One of the things I really wanted to ask you was about your journey. It's been such an unusual career with, so many twists and turns. And I know that in your book, you sort of reference some of them. But I'd love to hear your story in your own words.
It's been a fascinating life, Shalini. I am so privileged to be living my life, and I speak of it in third person, almost as if I'm not the one living my life, but I say it with absolute honesty that if I were to hear somebody else narrate their story in the way that my life has been, I would just fall in love with it as much as I'm in love with my life. And I think the beauty of it has been I'm someone who's navigated the journey of having a very strict, defined understanding and objective around life to having such fluidity today where I don't have any idea of where life could take me and being very comfortable with that. Because I'm someone who, one, as a science student, I was trained in bits and bytes, in 0 and 1, in black and white. Everything needs to be decisive or not, everything needs to be crystal clear. And I inherently am also that person. My personality is about lending order to chaos, being very prescriptive. When I speak, it almost sounds like bullet points, and I'll always have these three things to say and always have this list to achieve. So everything in my life was around to-dos, around lists, around goals, around targets. And the first and the foremost one of that, ever since I can remember growing up, was to become a space scientist. That was my only ambition in life and the biggest ambition in life. I, for the longest time, wanted to become a space scientist, and I was training towards that. I wanted to go to the US to get my PhD. I wanted to join NASA as a space scientist. I wanted to eventually go on Mars and become a research scientist there. And I did go to the US. I did enroll for a PhD program. I was doing well in it. It was something that I was good at. But for the first time in my life, I realized while as a PhD student that what you're good at and what makes you happy could be two entirely different things. And that was a shocking revelation for me at the age of 23, 22, where I was doing well in something. And because I was good at it, I was getting what people called success. But if I just stood in front of the mirror and asked myself, was I happy doing it? The answer was maybe not. Definitely not extrapolated into the future. And that's when I'd made what I would argue would be one of the boldest moves in my life, which I'm so glad worked out for me. I decided to drop out of my PhD and come back to India. No plan, no goal, no idea of what I would be doing next. And that was a very big decision for somebody who only thought of going to the US and changing their life and that of their families forever. And we come from a very middle class family, hand to mouth existence. There was no financial stability ever in our family. So to leave such a position, especially when you're doing so well in it, was not well understood. And I can totally understand why. And then I went for an MBA. That worked out well. I did a consulting job for 3 years. I learned a lot, surrounded by smart people. I then had the opportunity to start up in 2009 when I was 29 years of age with a batchmate of mine from business school. I did that for a couple of years. That worked out well. Then I serendipitously got in touch with Groupon, which was a really large company back then. They were looking at people to start their India business, and they liked me for some reason. I liked what I saw of them, and I started the Groupon India business in 2011 for Groupon. Did that for 4 years. Then did the management buyout of Groupon's India business in 2015. Made that into an independent company called Nearby. Ran that for 4 years. Got it to profitability. Then quit to decide what to do next. And today I split my time between creating content, trying to build an education company, and investing and mentoring startup founders. And you're right that it has had so many twists and turns. And of course, I'm giving you the highs of it. The
Yes.
the lows were equally as decisive as the highs, which I'd love to get into if we have time. But it's been a fascinating ride, and I couldn't trade that for anything else.
No, I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I read your book, really enjoyed it. And by the way, I was a fan of Groupon. So I was a doctoral student, I think, when Groupon was at its peak in the US. And everything was like, is there a Groupon for this?
Yes,
I
yes.
totally understand. I mean, what a concept. It was a great business
It
idea.
was crazy. It was crazy. At that moment, it was like the thing.
Yeah. So, Ankur, did you ever imagine when you graduated from business school that this is, I mean, however long this phase of your career lasts, that this is what you would be doing? This didn't even exist.
Sorry, I
This
didn't get the
gap
last part.
didn't even exist, influencer, mega influencer, I would say.
I, I, I don't like that word, but no, it is what people use. So I'll stand by it. But the I think I'm really enjoying myself right now. I am. It's it was a very big move for me to go down this path because I had spent an entire decade, Shalini, being very clinical about my day. So I'm a time management ninja. Like I control my time because that I feel is the only asset that should be controlled. And if you control that well, you can control everything well. So I've for the longest time I know been very good with managing my time. And uh, while I was the founder, while I was the CEO, my days were like clinically executed, and I just loved that vibe, like back to back meetings and context switching, and you're going from marketing to sales to financing to investor conversations and so on. So I wasn't sure of what life would be once it comes into this part of content creation and taking your time to do that, having a lot of free time on my hands. But I love this part. Maybe it's a reflection of the age I'm at, the kind of experiences I've had over the years, what I would want from life now. But I love being a teacher, and I've always loved being a teacher. For the longest time that I can think of myself, I was in some shape and form teaching somebody, if not myself. And I think that's what I'm doing right now as well. It's just a different mode.
It's so interesting you say that, Ankur, because one of the things I really want to learn from you is how are you so good at connecting with so many people? That's something you do absolutely brilliantly, by the way. I mean, and you use multiple formats for it. I've watched some of your videos, your PowerPoints, your short form, your long form. So, is there a secret sauce to it? What is it that helps you connect with so many people?
I I believe it's because I am genuinely interested in people's stories, and that I think would be the biggest factor of it. There are people who fake pretend or tell me a story, and they'll pretend to listen, but they wouldn't really be listening. But I have learned so much, Shalini, from observing people. So I'm one of those who doesn't have a mentor in life. Like I don't have a mentor. I don't have somebody that I work with through my problems, through my questions, through my comprehension. I have learned a lot from just observing people. And I'm a very keen observer. I'm a very, very keen observer. I can enter a room and kind of make out who's nervous, who is not, who's the confident one, who's not, who's struggling to be a part of it, who's loving this, so on and so forth. Like I'm perceptive in that sense. And I don't know where I got it from, so I don't spend time thinking about that. But I do think that since it's a highlight of my comprehension about the world, I use it to my advantage. So when I create content, I am asking myself three things. Number one, is this something which is immensely obvious and yet people don't do it? Because people want to hear the obvious things again and again, to be reminded that they are obvious. People think that people want to consume novelty, but that's not as much. We want to consume something which is just obvious, but we want it to be delivered to us in a fashion that's consumable, because then that makes the obvious land well on you. Otherwise you would have been hearing it every single day. Like our parents have spent a eternity of their life saying, sleep early, wake up early, brush your teeth, eat on time, don't be in front of a screen all day, go and exercise, go and like all of these things are obvious. We all know that. But there's a reason why there's so many people who still don't do it. And it's because the obvious is always delivered in a manner that's boring, that's almost prescriptive. And I ask myself, is this obvious? Because that's the first quantification of, or rather qualification of the content. The second one is it coming in from my own personal experience? So I rarely share anything that I haven't experienced myself. So I'm blessed that I have 42 years of experience, and I'm not like this 24-year-old creating content and trying to make people believe that I have sorted my life out. I'm 42, have had so many mistakes in my life that I've learned from the hard way as against the easy way, and I have a fair bit to share. So I will always ask myself, is this coming in from a point of personal experience that lends in that weight? And then number three is, am I saying it in a manner that they can relate to? So the obvious part of it is something which is necessary, but the relatability part is something which requires a lot of work. And that I think has come over years of just observing what lands well on people, how does it work, how does it not work, so on and so forth. I'll give you a simple example, and this will emphasize on the point. We all know how much trust is important in a professional environment. Like trust is fundamentally the building block of any interaction. So one way is tell people, hey, conduct yourself in a manner that you can be trusted. Because if you can be trusted, then people will give you opportunities. But that's obvious, right? Everybody knows this. How does it land well on people? How does it get delivered in a fashion that it stays with them? And the only way is you have to embed that into a story and not a prescription. Because a prescription becomes a moral science chapter, which we hated in school, but we were forced to consume. You want to build it into a story, which is what we deliver. So I remember when I was in my first project in consulting right out of business school, I went through a project where my manager, frustrated, gave me what I would argue was the best advice I've got professionally. And he said, "Hey, Ankur, if I can't trust you, it doesn't matter how smart you are." And so when you embed that story and then this message, everybody gets it, because now they can see themselves in that movie as we see ourselves in that Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, Ranveer Kapoor, Priyanka Chopra, Alia Bhatt movie, whatever. And we find ourselves in that character in some shape and form, and that creates that relatability. You have to do the same thing in your content as well. And that, I think, thin words. The other thing, and I'm sorry I'm giving you a very long answer, but it's important, is one thing that I often get from people, which is not something I had to work hard for because that's just me, is people say, "We love the fact that you are very authentic. You don't pretend to be someone else. If you make a mistake, you just move on and you accept it because everybody makes mistakes. You are so comfortable, or at least seem to be comfortable, with sharing your failures and your losses and where you made a mistake." And all of that makes you very relatable, because we don't want to see people as super men and women. We want to see people as normal men and women. And we want to see them in a way that we would want to be, but we also know that we can get there if we wish to be. And that is a big difference. You don't want an aspiration that's so far away that you don't even know how to get there.
Wow, that's going to take me some while to sort of process. That's amazing, Ankur. How did you stumble upon this, or did you discover it, or did someone teach you how to do this?
I go back to my observation. I don't think somebody taught me in the sense कि आओ बैठो मैं तुम्हें बताता हूँ कैसे होता है. It's more about just observing people, the best communicators that I am inspired by, the best storytellers. Like I would see I love movies. I love movies, but only the good ones. Like, so I'm not that one ki koi bhi movie dekh lenge just because वो release hui hai. So I really like good quality cinema, and I am a storyteller at heart. So I would I would go and understand, like, how is it that this acting, like, this is acting, this is not, this person is not living this life, this person is for God's sake acting. How is it that they're able to convince us that they are this character? It is fascinating for me. So I think endless hours of reading, of consuming content, of observing people in real life just made me go through that again and again and again. And one thing that has really helped me, Shalini, is, in my opinion, writing and public speaking. Writing is unfortunately something that most people, especially in this generation, are not doing. And it's a tragedy, because writing is the slowest form of expression, and that forces you to pace your thoughts. It forces you to select the best thought amongst all the gazillion thoughts you have in your head and put it pen to paper. And that skill is for life, because our thoughts will always keep consuming us, and we'll have hajar things to say and we wouldn't know what the right thing is at what right point. But if you know how to write, and you know how to deliver what's in your mind cohesively, then you have a gift. And I have been writing, I think, ever since I know myself. I still write every day. And that's something that has really helped me just orchestrate my thoughts and bring it into some sort of structure.
I was actually going to ask you this, that, your careers, you've had so many different experiences. So skills that go into being a consultant, that too with, one of the big consulting companies, are quite different from those that go into being an entrepreneur, and absolutely different from what it takes to be a content creator, a writer, a connector, And I was wondering, how do you manage, or how have you managed to navigate very different worlds? What would be some of the meta skills, if you like, that have carried you through I know in your book you speak about how you're a fan of habits and not goals as much. So just wondering, are there habits? Are there meta skills? Are there mindsets? The way you look at things that have helped you navigate very different worlds almost.
It's a combination of multiple things, Shalini. I I believe the strongest contributors to this ability to navigate seemingly very different territories is number one, what you referred to, habits, and those habits beautifully compound to almost begin to ignore the circumstance that they are in. And that's why habits are so powerful. It's almost like when you know how to cycle, you can suddenly cycle anywhere. You're not questioning whether you're cycling on grass or you're cycling on the beach or you're cycling anywhere because the process remains the same. The effort required will be different, distinctly so.
Yeah.
But it's not that you have to learn how to cycle on a beach because you've only cycled on the roads so far. No, you don't have to. You never have to learn cycling ever again. You never have to learn how to drive ever again. And that's beautiful because that's like the habit embedded in you. And that's the same thing for me as well. But what are those habits that have helped me? Number one is, as I said, writing. Writing has helped me so much because it just helps me orchestrate my thoughts. It helps me bring structure to my thoughts. And whenever it's funny, whenever I'm feeling that my mind is getting chaotic, the thing that I do is like literally pen, paper, and start writing. Just write or draw or sketch or do whatever. But the minute I have the paper in my hand and I have a pen in my hand, I just channelize my thoughts in a way that's magical. And I don't know how that happens. That's number one. Number two is understanding that most decisions that you make in life are reversible. Most decisions that you make in life are reversible, but we think they're not. So we consume ourselves and we cripple ourselves to take what we think is the right decision because we want to take the right decision.
Yeah.
But the truth is, there's no one who knows what the right decision is before the decision is taken. You will only get to know if the decision is right after you've taken the decision. But we would just paralyze ourselves in wanting to take that right decision. And that, I believe, is the biggest reason why most people can't move forward. For me, most decisions in my life I know are reversible. Like even when I took the hardest decisions, let's say if I think about the biggest decision that I've made, which was to come back to India after dropping out of my PhD, if God forbid things didn't work out, I knew I could always go back to my PhD. What I lose would be just years, but I would not lose the opportunity. I would just lose what, 2, 3 years in a life which I hope would be about 60, 70 years of working. What is it like? 4, 5%? So if I lose 4, 5%, but I have the ability to come back to it whenever I want, I would buy that trade because that is a good trade to make. That is a great deal to make. If somebody said, hey, give us 4% of the total value and you can come back to it whenever you want, should you want to, buy that. That's what insurance is. You pay such a small premium for such a big cover that gives you the ability to spend as much if you have to on you and your family. Why do you buy it? Because that's a smart deal to do the same way. So decisions. And the third one, which has really, really helped me is, I don't know where I got it from, but very early on in life, I began to always think, what is it that most people would do in this circumstance? And I somehow convinced myself that if I were to do the same thing, I would end up being like everybody else because that's a law of physics. That's how nature works. If you do what everybody does, you will be where everybody is. You cannot be disproportionately different from people if you do what people do. So for me to have a shot at doing something which is remarkably different, I had to think of ways that people would mostly not think of. So in a circumstance, I would always ask myself, what are most people likely to do? And then I would think of options that people would not think of. And then I would see which one of them could be something that has potential interest, impact, and excitement in my life. And frankly, those were more often than not the decisions that I ended up taking. And the beauty about life is you don't need to be right every time. You need to be right very few times, but be really right at that point of time. So I'm just lucky. Don't believe a word of what I'm saying because, frankly, this is massive survivorship bias. Shalini is speaking to a survivor who has been through several shipwrecks and has just been the lucky one who continued to survive all of them. So, all of this could be bullshit because so many people dropped out of their PhD and unfortunately never made it. So many of them became an entrepreneur, unfortunately never made it. So many of them started a content creation journey or something else, never made it, and they also have stories to tell. And I'm just telling you the grand good side of it, but it's worked for me, which is why I'm saying it. Doesn't mean that it will work for everybody, but that's my story.
Of course, so tell me this now. I know you speak a lot to young people, people in their 20s, 30s, and you think about them a lot in the kind of writings you do. So we are now living in a world where there's so much change coming at, where careers are morphing, career ladders are frankly changing quite substantially. Businesses are changing, companies are getting disrupted. So in a world where there's so much change, what advice would you give people who are early career on how they should think about their careers perhaps differently from the way you know others before them have?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked this question. It's something that I speak about quite often. When we look at our parents' generation, or when today's generation looks at people like us, there is a big shift that's happened, and that's largely driven by the velocity of change. Our parents were just concerned about one thing: survival. I was just that. There was no aspiration as such for most. It was just survival. Do I make enough money to have the ability to pay the bills next month? That was it. I don't want to get fired because that could be meaning disaster for our family. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm on the bench and I will get back. No, there was no sabbatical. There was no, oh, let's take a 3 month break or a gap year. Nothing of that existed, and rightfully so. So they saw a very different world. We at least were able to see a world where there was no internet. Then we became part of the internet. There was no opportunities, at least in India, before the liberalization. Then it happened, and we saw completely a different phase of growth and so on. So there is clearly a very different side that we have seen. But today's generation is growing up on steroids, and they don't even know it because every single year something's changing. So I often say, here is what you cannot do. There is no way that you can plan for this. No way that one can plan for this. In our parents' generation, they could plan for decades of work. Oh, let me become a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, a CA. And I know that conclusively for 20, 30, if not more years, that's what I will have to do. And life will be settled. And then our generation was, okay, let's get a degree, let's get an MBA and so on, and we'll be sorted for at least 10, 20 years. Now, frankly, you get any degree in 3 years, redundant. Things will change and come and replace it. So the only thing that you can do in the absence of not having any ability to plan is to have the ability to become a student whenever you have to. That's the only thing you need to learn. How to become a student whenever you have to. What does it mean to become a student? It genuinely means what it means to become a student. Go back to your college days, even if you hated it, and understand that college's main purpose, which unfortunately did not serve very well, was not to teach you the subjects, economics and physics and chemistry and history and geography. No, it was to teach you how to learn. That was the job. It may have failed at that, but you still have to learn that. What does it mean to pick up a course and go through a well defined curriculum? What does it mean to gather the experience and translate that theory into practical? What does it mean to apply those practicals, to make mistakes, to become better and better at it? What does it mean to become an apprentice, to have an internship and go through projects that can equip you in real life skills? What does it mean to go out and look for those opportunities and do them as a side gig as against the main one early on? What does it mean to know when to make that shift or pivot from your main to a side gig that you have been working on for several years? That is something which is an inescapable skill one has to build. Because if you don't, the bad news is you're gone. A machine or somebody who does your job faster, better, cheaper will replace you. But if you know how to become a student, then take it from me, you will have to become a student every 5 years. And a student of a completely new course, a completely new domain, a completely new industry, a completely new way of doing the same work that you were doing. And you have no choice but to do it or to get destroyed.
Uncle, do you think there are going to be different mindsets or, you know, skills, psychological skills or capabilities that are going to be needed for dealing with this kind of flux and uncertainty?
There, there is a big mindset shift for no fault of theirs that this generation will have to adapt, and that is the ability to live life in isolation as against comparison. What do I mean by this? Growing up, you and I, Shalini, would have had our experiences with comparison. But you know what? Our parents could only compare us to what? 30, 40 kids at best, those in school, those in our colony. That was it. Like,
Yeah,
so Sharma ji ka beta was an actual living entity. Like, हम उसको जानते थे, जिसके साथ हमारा comparison होता था. But today, the entire world is there for you to compare yourself with. Like literally every 20-year-old is
yeah,
there as a data point for you to compare yourself. And there is no way that you will win that battle because there's nobody who can win that battle.
yeah,
You can never be the richest 20-year-old. You can never be the most famous, most successful 20-year-old. You can never be the most talented 20-year-old. You can never be the one who scored the most marks as a 20-year-old because there'll always be somebody in a 7 billion world who
yeah,
will be better than you. So the comparison set that you are going to force yourself on has to be something that you decide, because your parents will still continue to compare yourself with real entities, people that you know of. But you, because you spend time on Instagram, on Discord, on TikTok, on wherever else, you will be comparing yourself to your friends, strangers, celebrities, people who are just seemingly living the life while you are still miserable, still lost, still confused. And you will have to build a mindset where the only person that you are ever comparing yourself with is the one who you were yesterday. That's the only thing that you can compare with. Because frankly, the only person who is sitting with the same strengths, the same weaknesses, the same privileges, the same opportunities, and the same temperament that you have is you yourself. Nobody else has that. So it's so unfair that you would compare yourself to anybody else. And if you could compare yourself to only the person you were yesterday, you will serve yourself far, far, far better. That's a really hard mindset to acquire. It's intensely hard to do. But I would reckon that the ones who are able to do that are the ones who will move forward, while the others will struggle until they get to that point.
wow. So much of self knowledge in that part, So I'm going to read a few comments. Yeah. Hi, TK Bakshi. He says, hello, good to be here after a long break. He's busy in women power in Kashmir files now back. Ankur is a great guy. Have known about him. Would love to hear his story. So you shared a little bit of your story. Thank you, TK, for joining us. Sajid Kumar says, Uncle, what does the future of work hold post COVID 19? What do you think is going to be the new norm?
I think future of work is going to see, particularly if I speak about India, two new streams emerging from the streams that we have already seen. So there is this existing stream, which has been somewhat disrupted by COVID, but I don't think it is going to materially change. So when people say, oh, remote is now the future and hybrid is now the future, I think we will settle into a point where that may not be so. Because the definition of hybrid for most organizations is 2 to 3 days come to office and the rest work from home. But that does mean that you have to be in the same city as the office, which is not really remote, because if you're not from that city, you have to then suddenly be in that city. And that is not the level of independence that remote ideally should grant. So I am at least of this opinion that traditional work will somewhat converge back to what it used to be pre-COVID. It may take some quarters, but in my opinion, it's inevitable that it will. But there are two streams that I think will emerge as the future of work. One, there will, in my opinion, be a mega influx of freelancing as a legit career, not as something that you were forced to pick because you didn't get a full time opportunity, but it's a choice that you actively make, because that is the strongest outcome, in my opinion, of COVID and the way work has changed. It's made the entire world a global talent pool. I believe India stands to benefit a lot from it, because we not just have great quality talent, we also have communication in large part English that makes us business friendly with the rest of the world. We have the power of numbers where we can just have entire centers built from this country alone. And of course, we have a culture that makes us very subservient to servicing. So we are totally okay spending endless hours in just trying to service clients, not necessarily looking for a work life balance that makes us stop working at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. every day. We're like totally okay working endless hours while it makes us money and gives us the acknowledgement and respect that we want or seek. So freelancing, in my opinion, is becoming a very legit career, especially for people in their 20s, and is going to be more so. And then a part of that freelancing piece is also the entire Web3 world, where I'm a firm believer in Web3, irrespective of what's happening in crypto right now, which for me is just a economic shakeup. But as a fundamental, Web3, decentralization, blockchain, these are technologies that will define the future of the world. And I believe that India stands to gain a lot from this revolution that's going to happen. The other piece is I do expect a lot of youngsters and work decisions to be eventually centered around entrepreneurship. I think that we have experienced about 20 odd years of foundational entrepreneurial work in the country. And now we have had multiple success stories. We also have the audacity to dream big. We also have the infrastructure to dream big. We also have the capital that allows us to dream big. So we're going to see in the next 20 years the similar Silicon Valley and China entrepreneurship wave that happened in theirs happen here as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if a large part of the story around India by 2050 or so will be about entrepreneurship, around decentralization, and about India being the freelancer hotbed for the entire world.
Sajid, I'm also going to add a perspective here. So our organization, Uncube, actually works in this area a lot. You know, what's shifted for employees, how have expectations shifted, how organizations are now rethinking the workplace, what are the different work arrangements that they're thinking of. And you know, one of the things we're finding is that there's been a huge shift in employee expectations. So, in fact, we have a report which will come out in about a month or so. It's qualitative research plus survey based methods, where we're speaking to people across industries, and we're actually focused on people in their 20s and 30s to see what's shifted for them. And the early results, as we're getting them, is almost 90% of respondents want flexibility in their roles in some way or the other. And that's a huge challenge for organizations because now it means that you need to factor that in, that employee expectations have shifted. And, HR folks, and I've been one, talk about what's our employee value proposition, which is essentially, what is it that why should someone join us? And very quickly, flexibility, wherever it comes in, is, it's a hot ticket selling item.
Yeah.
So that's a huge shift. The other shift which has happened, and Ankur's absolutely right that Indians have traditionally, I think, been very happy to work endless hours. Work life has, you know, maybe like for a tiny majority, that a tiny minority, that may have even been a concept. But there is a shift. I mean, we're still nowhere close to what many other parts of the world are, but there is absolutely a shift
Yeah.
where somewhere, because of the COVID experience and the opportunity to spend more time with family, we're finding that young people are asking for, you know, better work hours,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
asking for, uh, we're not just here to make a living, but we're here to make a life. So that's a very interesting shift. And what finally economics determines, who has the say. But that's a shift that organizations are already working with and trying to say, okay, so what do we do now? How should we respond to some of what has changed? Seema,
So
hi, Seema. Seema knows you. So, Seema Chaudhary, she says hi. Two of my favorite people. Thank you so much. Saurabh Mehta. Hi, Ankur. Please advise your view with changing times on employee versus entrepreneur versus freelance. Will freelance ever get the same respect as it is treated in the US and UK?
absolutely, I think there already are. It depends on who you're working with, because respect is a function of not what you desire, but what the other person's definition of respect is when they decide to give it to you or not. And there are cultures which are very direct. There are cultures which are very respectful. There are cultures which embrace this as a way of life. And I don't think that has anything to do with who the freelancer or their quote unquote nationality or origin is. It's just a function of who the client is. So I know of so many freelancers from India who work with international clients on Freelancer, on Fiverr, on Upwork, and they are making far more money than they will in a full-time job. They enjoy the respect, the appreciation, the acknowledgement that comes from across the world every single day. And they are in control of their time. And as Shalini very, very aptly mentioned, they are also making those conscious decisions of not being consumed by work forever, and setting boundaries on what is it that they would want from not just their employees, but employers, but even their clients.
Yeah.
Here are my office hours. Here is the kind of work that I am expected to deliver, and you have to respect that. And there are enough people who are. So I think it's a matter of time. We think very differently because we always associate freelancing as the client servicing work that you often see in the Indian context, which seems like never admirable or respectful, but that's changing rapidly.
There's a question from Anshuman Tiwari. Hi, Anshuman. Happy to see you here. Anshuman actually hosts a LinkedIn live series of his own. It's called The Qualitist. So he asks you a question from one budding content creator to a pro one. Do you ever fear that you will run out of content? It's a good one.
When I die, yes, absolutely, because then I wouldn't have any observation. But I, uh, I think people who run out of content are the ones who run out of the ability to observe. We have so much content around us. We have so much content around us, and if you were to consume my content, you'll see that I love to pick up seemingly trivial instances in life that teach you so much about life and about just how things are so different than what we perceive it to be. I'll give you a very simple example to illustrate this point. One of my most successful video reels on Instagram was this topic of same words, different meaning. And what it referred to was a conversation that my wife had with our 4-year-old daughter, where my wife had we were stepping out for some evening, and she had applied lipstick, and Uzma, our 4-year-old daughter, was like, "Mom, you should apply light lipstick." And Ruchi, my wife, she is someone who applies light lipstick. So she's like, "No, this is light." And she's like, "No, this is not light. This is dark." And she's like, "No, but this is light." And we went back and forth until we realized that for Uzma, light means sunshine. It means day. So for her, light lipstick meant a bright lipstick, or actually a dark lipstick in the way that we think about it. While for her, a dark lipstick meant night, evening, low light. So it meant something which is actually light.
Wow.
And I just made content on that so many times in our normal life, we hear a word and we embrace it with the meaning in our head of what the word is, very rarely stopping to ask what is the meaning of that word from the one who said it. And that was the takeaway. Now, that is, no one's going to give you that content. That content is going to come to you. And trust me, I don't have to work very hard to get that content. It's just about you have to see content in literally every day, every instance.
Wow. Ankur, what are the nitty gritties that go into being, such a strong content creator? Uh, you post good quality, but also a lot of content. Uh, if you're open to like taking us, what does it look like behind the scenes? What goes into all of that?
I've actually documented all of this, Shalini, and I'm happy to share that link with you so that you can share it with the audience. Um, because I was trained in the sciences and process and experiments and everything laid out, for me, everything is a process. So if you were to actually look at our content workflow, it will look so scary that you're like, I don't want to touch it. Because everything is mechanized. Everything is mechanized. For me, creativity is a process. It's not something that happens one fine day because you're feeling that wave of it. No, it's something that you do every single day when you get up. So, to explain briefly what I do behind the scenes, along with, of course, a team that helps me immensely execute all of this, all of my content, all of the video content that goes out in a single week, which is close to about 64 pieces of unique content, 64 pieces of unique content that go out every week across 5 platforms. All of that is shot on a Monday afternoon between 2 to 5 p.m. That's when I shoot my YouTube videos, I shoot my Instagram reels, I shoot my YouTube shorts, I record my podcast, I do every bit of other video work that I would have to do. And that is shot in that 3 hour span. Of course, there is preparation that goes at my end before that, which happens on a Sunday, Monday morning, and so on. Once that is done, it gets into the content factory. And the content factory will be, it goes to the audio engineer for a cleanup, it goes to a video editor for the editing, it goes to a graphic designer for the graphics. They work on it for 2 weeks. It goes to a subtitling agency that brings all of that together and transliterates it. And then it comes back as a finished product. That finished product then goes through a review, and every second is reviewed, comments, that is cleaned up, and then it goes to a distribution team. They then line up that content, schedule it for every day for every platform wherever it has to go, and that's how it automatically goes. And behind the scenes is this orchestra that is working. It's literally a factory, and that's why we call it the content factory. where everyone's role is very well defined, everyone's deadline is very well defined, everyone's task is very well defined, including mine, and we just run as per the plan. No one deviates from the plan. Every Tuesday, there's a report that is shared with the entire team on who missed their deadlines and what is the contribution there. So no one wants to see their name on that list because that's like a shame list of sorts. And it took us less than 4 weeks to get to 0% misses. We started reporting it, and less than 4 weeks, we're at 0% misses. No one misses their work. Everyone does it on time. Everyone has their own schedule. We don't track people every day. We just track them on when they have to deliver and the quality of it. And and yeah, a lot behind the scenes, but I'll share that document. It's fairly elaborate, and I'm very proud of that.
No, it's super, super impressive, Uncle. It's super, super impressive. And of course, it helps us understand the process. Nothing good, and particularly at this scale, just happens. It takes a lot to make all of that happen. So that's really, really helpful. And good, I
Thank you.
realize we are almost at time, but I really want your views on what does it really take to build a brand in a world where there's just so much that's vying for our attention. And over the last few years, that's something you've done amazingly well. So if you could share with us some of what you've learned on what does it take to build a strong brand.
I believe that the first thing, and I go back to this very powerful video that I'll encourage the entire audience to watch. It's called Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. It's a brilliant piece of work done by Simon Sinek, who's a thought leader in leadership, in employee morale and motivation. And he talks about the golden circle, which is everybody in the world knows what they do 100%. Everybody knows what they do. Some of them know how they do what they do. Like, so what really makes them do what they do? But very few people know why they do what they do. And when you look at the best brands, you will realize that all of them start with the why. They start with the why. And that why defines the how, and the how then defines the what. But the beauty of this approach of starting with why is that if your why is always centered, it doesn't matter what is it that you do. So one of the examples that Simon quotes in that video is that of Apple. Apple believes in thinking different. It believes that one ought to think different from how others do. And the way it thinks differently is by building products that are great to use, great to feel, great to look, and give a sense of pride. It happens to make computers. But tomorrow it could make a watch and we would
Yeah.
still buy it. It could make a car, we would still buy it. It would make shoes, we would still buy it. Apple could make anything and we would buy it because we are aligned with their why of think different. It's like Nike. Nike believes that you are an athlete if you have a body. That's it. For you to become an athlete, all you need is just your body. Everything else can be delivered. So when you have that feeling, it doesn't matter what Nike is building because the minute we wear Nike clothes, we suddenly feel like we're athletic. It's like Harley. Harley Davidson is all about when you ride, you have a sense of freedom. And they believe that humankind should be free. And that's the ideology. Nobody asks ki Harley Davidson ka mileage kitni hai. Nobody has ever in their history asked that.
Yeah.
So I believe most brands lose out because they don't know why. Why do they exist? I know for a fact why I exist. I know the purpose of why we're building this brand, and that is to create a sense of awareness because I believe that decisions in life should be made from a point of awareness and not ignorance. And often decisions in life are made from a point of ignorance because we don't know any better. So we make that choice thinking that that's the best choice for us. And only if we were to make choices from awareness, we would make far richer choices. And when you do that, you attach it with values. So the why of the brand and then the values of the brand. How do you want people to see you? What is the emotion that you generate in them? You could be generating an emotion of fun, humor. You could be actually generating an emotion of jealousy, of anger. You could be generating an emotion of authenticity, of being friendly. You could be generating any emotion that you wish to, but you then need to be consistent with that emotion, because that's when people begin to associate the brand and the emotion. It's what people see and feel when they consume you as a brand. Once you do that, it frankly doesn't matter what you do. You could be writing poems and books, you could be creating videos, you could be a voiceover artist, you could be building products, you could be an entrepreneur, you could be a mother, a father, you could be anybody that you wish to be, and your brand will still hold tight as long as you know why you're building that brand and what are the values that the brand stands for. That's something that we've done. We actually have a deck that we started with before we started everything, which was the brand deck of what we wanted to do and how. That deck hasn't changed. What has changed is, oh, we're also doing a podcast. Oh, we're also writing a book. Oh, we're also doing this and that. But the why and the how hasn't changed. The what will keep changing. And that's frankly the least important part.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ankur. I know we're at the hour, but before we end, what would be, two or three your best advice for, frankly, all of us who are building careers, building organizations, brands in a world that's changing so fast? What would be two or three things that you've learned over the years stand you in good stead?
I think there'll be only one which I would frankly share, and that's with the acceptance and the awareness that I'm not nearly one of the smartest people that I know. So there is no hope in hell that I can be a inventor. Like I don't think I have it in me to become an Elon Musk or anybody equivalent from that perspective. So if I'm not going to be an inventor and I'm going to be more a curator and a consumer, and that will be true for most people in the world, then the only one thing that you would want to do, which I do and it works very well for me, is don't think that your problems are unique. Don't think that your struggles are unique. Somebody out there, and that somebody is frankly millions of people, have gone through exactly the same thing that you are going through. And it is only and only going to be your ego that comes in your way of learning from them. That's it. It's funny, I wrote an email to my editor last morning exactly on the same thing, where we were having a back and forth on some things that we were discussing. And I said, my fundamental principle in life, Chiki, is that if it has already been solved, then I will learn whatever it takes from that person who solved it and just repeat. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to be an inventor. I don't have to design something from scratch. There is so much experience that this world is living on. That's a tragedy we don't reflect and we let our egos get the better of us. That's why I love books. That's why I love having conversations such as these, because I only learn from somebody else who's navigated life differently, but there'll be something that I garner from it that will help me in my situation. That's the same thing that I will tell to everybody. Your situation is most certainly not unique. You make it unique in your head because you are inward looking. But if you were to look outward, that exact same situation has happened multiple times to millions of people. Draw strength from their story. That will give you the strength to fight whatever you're fighting.
Wow. Ankur Warikoo, thank you so much for coming on the show. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Future of Work Show. For past episodes, visit our website, YouTube channel, or you could even find them if you go back on my LinkedIn posts. Stay tuned. Have a great weekend, and thank you very much for joining. With that, we come to an end.
Thank you.